differences and similarities between traditional versus virtual classrooms. Obviously, within in a physical space, the social interaction, you had the hand raising, the asking the questions. You can multitask much easier because you can use the proximity. You can use your eyes, your ears, to all these senses so that you can get a better sense of what's going on. The physical space and the environment, children have been acclimated to that since they're about 5 years old, right? Instructional materials, they're tangible. You can touch them, you can see them. Behavioral disruptions like talking, that's common, but we can mitigate those with different classroom management techniques. But now it's more of a lack of interaction and a limited ability to use nonverbal cues. Students develop a myopic viewpoint sometimes, and they do that already. There's a bunch of studies on that. Just staring at the cell phone, one, physically, it's a small screen. The eyes, your eyes get bad, but then in terms of your consciousness, you block out external stimulus, and you're not really processing the whole experience. All right, the attendance can be a problem in a virtual classroom because it's not the transportation element where everyone is expected to be there. They have to sign on, so it's just that simple for them to make that choice. The behavioral disruptions we've seen, kids drawing, the background noise, the visuals. Some people are drawing the whiteboard, and one time I heard a parent loud in the background having a conversation on the phone. Me and the kid, I could barely speak to the kid. We didn't even know, could barely hear what we were saying. All right.
All right, and so we're going to get into the operational definitions now. Right, the first one we'd be looking at would be cognitive flexibility. And that is controlled by the executive functioning part of the brain, this prefrontal cortex here, that's responsible for helping us with attention, with working memory, with being able to plan, organize, have some forethought, and have impulse control. And so you might think, why is that important in a pandemic? Obviously, the entire globe is experiencing to varying degrees having to deal with something that's so unknown and has been causing us a lot of distress for a while now. And we've had to switch gears from working in places where we could see our coworkers, we could see our students, to being online and transitioning. Being able to process all of that and being able to say, okay, I can adapt to this. I have the ability. I know how to teach. I know the skills. What can I do to transition effectively from that space that I know I go to my job to just being in a virtual space and doing that effectively enough for my students? And so the flexibility piece is being able for us to be objective, for us to be able to adapt, for us to be fair-minded when we're processing things, for us to also create new strategies to help us transition, particularly when we are dealing with unexpected conditions and the environment, unexpected conditions within the environment.
All right, so we're going to discuss a few concepts related to connectivity. And this term actually was coined by Joe because we were having the phone conversations trying to figure out how to present this concept of being able to translate an emotional quality and mindfulness over the computer. All right, so we got a few terms that were relatable to this situation. One would be emotional contagion. Emotional states can be transferred directly from one individual to another by mimicry, right? So obviously children are sponges, and then they're going to repeat what they hear, and they're going to do what they see as well, right? And we're going to get into how that translates with the next definition. This transfer of emotion may be via emotionally relevant bodily actions, particularly facial expressions seen in others. Now, I think most of us, we've heard that 90% of communication is body language, right? But when you're on a computer, the only thing you really get to see is a face, right? So the face your facial expression is so important, right? The eyebrows, having an open face, what your resting face looks like when you're thinking. A lot of people translate that into, if you're an intense person, they're like, oh, Mr. Lloyd is upset with me, right? The other day, I was doing a math lesson online, and I noticed the first 5 minutes, I was a little monotone. And as soon as I switched my mindset into, okay, energetic, compliments, yes, sir, no, sir, thank you, madam, please, excellent. The energy of the lesson picked up instantly, and the students were just, I don't even know if they realized it, but the energy that I put in my intention into what I was trying to get done, the students immediately started to pick up themselves. Social connection refers to the feeling that you belong to a group and generally feel close to other people. So that intent, right? The consciousness that you bring into that lesson before you even switch on is extremely important. The mindset that you bring into it before you even switch on the camera is so important, because the students are, as usual, even in the classroom, they're looking to us for their cues, all right?
So now we're going to take a look at, some of the challenges to when we do not have as much cognitive flexibility. And what we've been seeing is that, people have been expressing increased depression, anxiety, a sort of inability to effectively perform tasks, inability to perform social roles, and a cognitive rigidity, a difficulty in changing mindsets. And this brings to mind, I had a student come into my office in a panic, very, very distressed. And I said to him, okay, what's the matter? He said to me, my best friend, I'm so disappointed that he's not my best friend anymore because he burst my gold chain that my dad gave me. And I said to him, okay, let's take some deep breaths, let's calm down. So you're saying that he's your best friend? He said, yes. I said to him, who's this best friend? What's his name? And when he told me the student's name, I said, but that's a really decent young man. I know him. I said to him, let's invite him to the session and hear his perspective. Let's hear what he has to say. So the young man brought his best friend in, and the best friend was absolutely as distressed as the young man who came in originally. And he said, I'm so sorry, I made a big mistake. I accidentally burst your chain. And it showed the first young man, it showed him that he was really judging his best friend wrongly, that it was an accident. It helped him to change his mindset from blaming him and feeling disappointed and even wanting to end the relationship, to stepping back and saying, okay, it really was an accident and I could get my chain fixed. Right, so that was the cognitive flexibility piece. What we do is we teach our students how to think about their thinking, and we're going to share some of these practical, easily applicable skills later on.
Okay, now we will discuss a few of the challenges associated with these online connectivity gaps. Some of these could, as we discussed earlier, could manifest as lack of body language, the potential for distractions when you're home. You have snacks, TV, radio, games, etc. People talking in the background. It's difficult to check their work sometimes, because sometimes I like to get the students to share their screen, right? And then they'll have to hold their notes up to the camera, whereas, of course, in an actual classroom, you can walk and look over their shoulder, and that saves so much time, right? But technical difficulty sometimes, video, audio, lack of proximity and emotional connection, right? So now some of the ways to mitigate some of those difficulties. Now I do the mass text, the mass calls. I remind the parents each time before they have the meeting, because that's important in a live classroom, but now the communication with the family is probably, it's 2-3 times more important, because they're starting to realize as well with the kids home how difficult it is to actually deal with 30 students at one time, right? So once they participate more, then that dries up the quality of the instruction or the receptivity for the instruction, which is what happens in the classroom. But they have to have a certain mindset as well. We have to try to pull the parents in. Now, there's that concept between cinema and a theater, right? In the movies, you have cameras and angles and cinematography, the acting can be more subtle, right? They can guide it by the lighting and the shots. What in a theater, the person on stage has to be able to project, and the person in the last row has to feel what's going on with that actor, right? The movements are a little more pronounced. The voice obviously has to be projected, right? Establishing a communication and discussion norms. Now, what I was saying earlier about we used a thing called the Harkness method in the high school, right? We had an inquiry-based discussion type of curriculum where the students did most of the heavy lifting, right? If you, we have a document in the folder, but if you want to do a little more research, it was coined at Exeter in New Hampshire. But the students, they do the research, and this is important with virtual learning as well. They have to be prepared sooner with the notes to not waste that time, because a lot of these students are in class for about an hour a day when it used to be 7 hours. So they have to do that heavy lifting earlier. And since it's all digital, we also have more time to send those lessons home to the parents, right? And they have to be held more accountable as well. Hyper transparency and thinking aloud. That concept obviously comes from education in general, the think aloud, where you model the thinking process. But when I'm online, and what it seems that the students are a little more receptive to is, even when I'm questioning myself of what process to think about, that keeps their attention, and then they can have the confidence and courage to know, oh, okay, he was wrong just now in the way he wanted to approach that, but he corrected himself. That whole super transparency of giving your thought process to the student, and there's just a camera there, that helps to mitigate the lack of the body language and the vibration. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes you can walk into a room and immediately, oh, this is not for me. Or, wow, everybody's happy in here, I want to stay, right? You can cut the tension with a knife, so to speak, right? So we have to really be able to project as much as possible that natural communication to them, right? Practical solutions. And we're going to get into a couple of exercises, right?
Okay. Thank you, Sean. Okay, so we're going to get into, so this piece looks at cognitive behavioral therapy skills. And what that philosophy or school of thought, it stems from behavioralism, and then got into trying to understand if we could change the way we think, we could probably change the way we feel, and we could change the way we behave. So it was started by Aaron Beck, who shared that, people, when we view situations, we have a paradigm of a situation. We could either view that situation in a way that's going to help us increase our hope and resilience, or we could view it in a way that's very unhelpful. So it's really helping us to become more aware of our thoughts. Something that is also coined in what is known as CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, identifying our automatic beliefs. And we could find out, what are my automatic beliefs by keeping a journal for 30 days, recommended, and then going back through, I recommend keeping 2 journals, a positive entry journal where you only put positive entries, as well as a negative entry journal where you put everything that you saw was negative for that particular day, and doing that for 30 days. Now, what you're going to discover is remarkable. You're going to see patterns in your thoughts and patterns in your behaviors that would be able to help you, be able to say, well, wow, my automatic thoughts are, I think that I'm not good enough. I have this echoed over and over again. Or my automatic thoughts are, nobody likes me, or I'm unlovable. And we don't really get to see our thoughts when we're thinking it, but once we do that writing activity for 30 days, we will definitely see a pattern. And next we would look at reframing, which has to do with rethinking how we're thinking about something, particularly if it's negative. The reframing process helps us to challenge the original thought that we're having that might be negative, and saying, what's my proof of this? And how can I look at this in a more positive and realistic way? So we're going to take, I'd like for you to please have your pens and paper out to try this exercise with us. We have shared the Dr. David Burns handout. He has the 10 original and helpful thinking styles. We have just 4 that we're going to be focusing on due to our time commitments. We'll be looking at negative predicting, emotional reasoning, low frustration tolerance, and negative mind reading. Right, so negative predicting, that's like having a crystal ball. And we're looking in this crystal ball and we're saying, oh, this is going to go horribly wrong. I just know it. Right? And we're thinking that things are just going to be disastrous. The number 2, low frustration tolerance. That's when something does go wrong and we get so frustrated that we're just unable to reset. And that's where the cognitive flexibility piece comes in. How quickly can we reset? Can we say, okay, this has gone wrong. We had particular issues, but I think I'm resourceful. I could figure this out. I know who to call to help me, right? And so that's how we change sets. Next, we have emotional reasoning, which has to do with reasoning from how we feel. We feel as though we did badly, or we feel as though we messed up in something, and we start to identify ourselves as being idiots because we feel like, wow, I must be an idiot because this thing didn't go the way I wanted it to go. And it's us learning to separate the thing that we did from who we are as people, right? And it's very important to realize that. And finally, we're looking at negative mind reading. And so I joke with my students a lot because I say I do that sometimes too, and I have to stop myself. And then they say, oh, me too, and so they realize that they're not alone in being aware of their thoughts and saying negative mind reading is like assuming that someone is coming at us from a very negative place, or they are trying to be disrespectful to us, or they're trying to somehow put us down, and that may not be their intention at all. They may just be trying to ask questions or trying to understand where we're coming from. And it's important to understand the context of the unhelpful thinking styles, that it's really from a core set of beliefs that occurred much earlier on in our lives, in our childhood, where we formed these opinions of people and events, and we formed these ideas that we sort of use as a lens to guide us through life. And so I'd like us to try this activity for it's just going to take 3 minutes, right? And then we're going to do a debrief. So we have these 3 questions. Please identify the unhelpful thought by placing the correct number, either 1, 2, 3, or 4, next to it, and reframe the statements in a more positive and realistic way. Okay, so the first statement, none of my students really respect me. The second statement, there's no point to trying this, it won't work. And the third statement, I can't cope with this virtual thing for much longer. Right, so we're just going to have 3 minutes. I'd like you to take a chance at reframing it. And of course, identifying the type of unhelpful thinking style you think is guiding that statement or that thought pattern. We just have 3 minutes. 3 minutes for now. Thank you. And if some of you would like to just share in the chat, we would be able to just see really quickly what you came up with.
So just to clarify, you want us to put the numbers from the unhelpful thinking styles on the 1, 2, 3, where it applies?
Exactly, yes. So, for example, none of my students really respect me. Identify which number, instead of writing out the entire unhelpful thinking style, you could just put the number, yes. Good question, thank you. I'm trying to chat with you guys. Let me see.
I think you gotta,
It says, oops.
forward on the share screen. I don't know if you can
See, let me see.
go to more.
More chat. Yeah, why can't I chat?
Well, you share the PowerPoint as opposed to this one.
Oh, I shared a PowerPoint. How do I do that?
Click on the presentation. If you just click on share, they can see everything on the screen. They can't see this.
Okay. How are we doing for time?
1 minute, 20 seconds.
Okay.
You
Oh, look, it's here.
okay.
Okay. Okay. So let me see. Okay. 412. Okay.
1 minute.
I think 412. Okay. Okay. Great, going. Now let's reframe the entire statement. Oops. I need to talk to everyone. Okay, so I'd like you guys to also. Okay. Let's reframe the statements. Okay. All right. So we're going to debrief. Right. So let's take a look at what we came up with. Okay. None of my students really respect me. So we're looking at emotional reasoning and negative mind reading. Right? And so the answers that we could have come up with would look something like, some of my students have more respect for me than others. I can learn new skills to engage the other student. Who would like to share? We could get one share in. Who would like to share theirs? Oh, I think I have to figure out how to unmute, yeah.
They have their mics muted. Don't worry about it.
Okay. Okay, let's see.
I think
This is a challenge and difficult, but I want to try this. It will be great to get this to it. Yes. So Angelo, Valerie, thank you so much. Yes. What can I do to connect with my students? That was awesome. Yes, awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Valerie. Okay, so let's go to number 2. Number 2, we have negative predicting. So number 2, I can give this my best, which is what Valerie said too. If it doesn't work, I could still learn another method. Number 3, negative predicting as well as emotional reasoning. So you see the emotion there is I can't cope, right? And so I will cope. I will cope. I have coped with tough situations in the past. Everyone is going through this. I have the skills to help me process my stress, right? And I'm going to take a look really quickly in the chat room to see, what you guys shared. I'm not getting into the chat room just yet. Yeah. Okay. Okay, here we go more. All right. The virtual thing is new and difficult, but there are so many ways we can connect. Excellent job, Valerie. Yeah.
Nice.
All right. Okay. All right. So we're going to get into, so this brings us to the end of the reframing piece. Remember to check your folder. We shared Dr. David Burns, the entire Unhelpful Thinking package, so you could have a look at it. Now we're going to get into the other one. The second activity to help us with increasing cognitive flexibility would be the sensitivity analysis. And this is where this was borrowed from transferred from a financial perspective, where we're able to look at every single scenario to help us process which one would be best, as well as to help us be prepared to adjust, right? So we came up with a sensitivity analysis of having to teach virtually until December 2020. So again, I'd like you guys to please come up with 3 statements, just 3, for each of the following. The worst case scenario. What's the worst possible thing that could happen if you had to teach virtually until the end of the year? And what's the most likely case scenario if you had to teach until the end of the year? And again, what's the best case scenario that it would be perfect? Even if you had to teach until the end of the year, this would be pretty awesome to do. So let's come up with 3 statements for each category. And again, I'm going to go on to the group chat to monitor. And I can't wait for us to also get into the other part, the other piece. Okay. Oh no, it was this one. Sure. All right. So I'm looking for the chat. Everyone. Okay, let's see. So we have again about 2 minutes, and then we debrief. Do we use specific affirmations? I won't know any of my students. I won't be able to make. I won't know. Yep, that's really good. I won't know. So we have Kayoyu. I won't know any of my students and I won't be able to make connections. Excellent. Excellent. Yep. That is tricky to navigate. Yeah. Good. Nice. Nice. Yeah. Many of my scholars don't come back to school at all. Okay. Yeah, that's tough. Yep. No students involved or show up, lose job. Yes.
I usually get the admin involved from the school.
Admin.
Like sometimes when students don't show up, I get the administrators involved.
Yes. Yeah, we did the same for our students too. We get the administrators involved, is what Sean was sharing. Yeah, worst case, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
For sure.
Students not attending sessions, find ways to motivate students to attend sessions. Everyone enjoys the class because of fun elements. I like that, Kathleen. Thank you. Thank you, Gail. Yes, excellent. Which is we wanted you to share the worst case. Really good. Okay, guys, so let's take a look at some of the things we came up with to debrief. Have to keep monitoring time. Okay, so we have some ideas. Worst case scenario, increased isolation. Whoops, I went too far ahead. Here we go. Worst case scenario, increased social isolation, students not motivated. I saw some of you answering that. Poor time management, poor communication skills. Students without computers suffer the most. Poor self-care, right? We keep going, and we burn out, right? Most likely case, students navigate the social isolation by practicing more empathy, talking about their feelings, just touching base, how are you, and really caring about the person's response. Students and teachers help to motivate each other by learning what's working and what's not, and changing very quickly. Students and teachers advocate for businesses to donate hotspots and computers to students who don't have them. We've had a lot of that. We've seen a lot of communities really mobilizing to help out, and it's been beautiful. Best case scenario, We're reimbursed for online training to increase virtual teaching skills, right? We get more CE, continuing education offers. Students focus more because they don't have the behavioral stuff or the distraction.
True.
Right, I was working with this one student who he broke a door. That's why he had to come see me. And he said to me after 2 weeks of the quarantine, he said, I'm ready to go back to school. I've thought about it. I'm ready to focus and do what I have to do. I said, okay, that was great news. Right, and a greater sense of connectivity and engagement in classrooms. All right, so that was some of what we came up with, and I think that your answers were just on par. We're going to step into show and session now, the connectivity piece, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
All right. Okay. All right. This activity is called a culture circle. It was coined by Paulo Freire, Brazilian educator. He was born in Recife in an upper middle class neighborhood, and about 9 or 10 years old, he moved to Sao Paulo, and his quality of life had diminished dramatically. Right, so he had, at an early age, he had realized the juxtaposition of power and wealth and access to education and resources. So one thing that he had come up with was a culture circle. He had also become the head of the Department of Education in Brazil, where he raised the literacy rate, I think it was about 7% to over 90%. And then he got exiled, go figure, right? And he turned into a professor. He was a professor at Harvard for a bunch of years. He has a great book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed and also Critical Consciousness. They're awesome. It's like a philosophy textbook. Well, what we used to do here is that it's great for a discussion, inquiry-based classroom, but it's also awesome for virtual online because it breaks up the monotony and it also gets the students participating and initiating the learning, right? So we give them a question or an essential question or a picture, and the picture hopefully has some sort of a little bit of controversy, right? Something that's going to spark a conversation, right? So once they see the picture, they take down empirical data. They don't qualify it. If they see a red letter J, they write down there's a red J, right? The second step is to add those qualifications, right? They apply their prior knowledge to what they've listed. They might reframe the question if you use a question instead, like an essential question to prompt a lesson, to pique their interest, right? They might reframe that. So if a student says, oh, I see a red J, I remember I went summer break, I went to South Carolina and there was a restaurant called the J, right? Mm-hmm. So number 3, they make connections of these observations with society, right, and personal experiences. So now it can be some shared experience, like the one we're all having right now, right? Like everybody's in their homes on a computer trying to figure out how to make this happen in the best possible way, right? And then 4, they discuss those experiences and they share. And when the students and people in general, when you share knowledge and information, it makes for rich conversation, and that is a community building process, right? So then during the discussion, they're comparing their notes, and that goes back to compelling them as well as ourselves, of course, to be prepared with the notes and what we're going to discuss there, right? The 5th step is to take time to revisit the question or the photo that you put up, or the picture, whatever prompt it is, right? Has a solution been found? Are there more questions, right? So like I said, I like to use I like to use war recruitment posters sometimes because they're drawn like a comic strip, but they're like, the programming is heavy, right? So when the kids see it, it's like, oh wow, damn, like if I don't join, something's wrong with me, like, you know what I mean? So it's like things like that, or like there was the cover of a magazine that had LeBron James, but it was an analog of a recruitment poster where it was like a King Kong thing going on. So the kids, it's like when they get to see those types of connections, and it applies to people that they admire every day, right? And 6 is action. There's no point to going through all of this if we don't try to formulate a solution. And obviously, particularly with CWI, the service learning is very key. That's a big deal. The ethnography and community organizing. This whole event started based on community organizing.
Yes.
And then the conversations, I think, who was that? I forgot, somebody mentioned it during one of the conversations. In the build up to this actual event, the conversations in the rooms were just so rich. People wish we would recorded those.
Yes.
Right? So let's get to the prompt itself, right? So, okay, we have a picture right here, right? Now, what we're gonna do is, the first step, let's take a minute to just write down explicitly, with no qualifications in terms of emotional quality or anecdotal evidence, anything like that, of what you actually see. So an example would be, I see a pencil. That's it. So let's take a minute to do that right now. Just list everything you see. Oh. Think about 20 more seconds should be good.
Okay. I think there.
All right. So in number 2, what do these objects or observations represent to you? Right. So, that pencil, when I think about pencils, I'll say, when I used to be in math class, they made me use a pencil, but I hated the sound of a pencil, right? The scratching of it on the paper. So, so I would write that down, the sound, the irritating sound of the pencil, and I try to use a pen all the time, right? So just personal qualifications or a way to add meaning to the observation.
So for everything they observe, they have to put something personal? Yeah. Okay.
Optimally, yes.
Okay.
But it's time. It's for time. This right here, this activity, like we did this at the county. It's gonna take 50 minutes alone.
Yeah, it's a fun activity.
Yeah, I like it.
I want to see what the chats are looking like. I see we have one chat.
Oh, yeah.
Good. Laptop.
True.
Student person thinking of burns out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now we have to connect that sort of...
Connect these observations to society and our personal experience.
Yeah.
All right. In about a minute, we're going to share out, all right, the notes that we've made. Get about a minute. This is one of the tools he used in Brazil with a lot of the communities, different community organizing groups to raise the literacy rate.
Oh wow!
And also adults, the adult population. Yeah. All right. Well, let's start sharing out. All right. Let's start sharing. We can share it in the chat if anybody wants to share out. You know,
they're sharing. We have three shares in the chat.
My bad. Okay.
Go up to the first one. No, go scroll up a little bit. Yeah. No, not all the way. There we go. We have Valerie. It appears
to be a person thinking over a laptop. I sense that there may be some frustration. I know what it's like when you want to toss your computer out the window. Yeah, true. Right. And that's even before the quarantine.
Yes.
Before, right? I see a person in front of a computer with their heads down and hands in fists. Personally, computers make me think of work and school. Fists in anger. Student with their heads down. Oh, it says 120 seconds. Okay. I have to skip to the last step really quickly, and we'll put all of this in the folder as well, right? In terms of action, how can we apply what we gained in this discussion? And the first thing that came to my head was conferences like this. I thought Joe had an awesome idea. First of all, CWI, of course, where we met him. I love the whole Monday through Thursday sessions, and this virtual conference here is. I'm going through some of the sessions myself.
Yes.
And it's a beautiful thing, and it's community organizing in itself. All right.
How could somebody apply this really quickly to a math class, say a math teacher?
We did a lesson on stop and frisk, right? Because in New York City, I think it was stopping about 95% of the people that were stopped were quote unquote black and brown, and less than 1% of them were committing a crime. So we use that as a lesson to discuss proportions, right, and ratios, right? But we would put a prompt up. There's a kid, being accosted by the police, etc. But we can. That's one of the beautiful things about it. Whatever resonates with you and/or your students, you can choose that type of picture to prompt that discussion. It's just a nice format to get the conversation going.
Gotcha.
Right.
Okay. That was awesome, Sean. Thank you. All right, so we have the debrief. Yes. Gail, yes. Very good, very good. Okay, so we've come to the end of our presentation. I hope that you've understood the operational definitions of cognitive flexibility and connectivity. Returning to main
I'll
session.
take a few moments. All right, boom.
Okay.
Colorado.
Hi, guys.
Hello, all. As you are joining us again, I am going to go ahead and move you all into your final